Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to Manchester and to the Northwest. I want to talk for 10 15 minutes, talk about Transport for the North, so who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then what happens next and how you might get involved as we further develop the first Northern Transport Strategy. Although we're called Transport for the North, and we're clearly all about transport, we are part of an economic project. So our whole rationale is about driving living standards and economic strength in the North through greater transport connectivity. So although Transport for the North is made up of people that work in the transport planning area, works with national agencies on helping develop the priorities for the North of England, it is with the aim of driving up economic value and improving the quality of the life for the people living in the North of England. We cover a big area. We represent, have a partnership board chaired by John Cridland. We have 19 local government partners, the local transport authorities, ranging from the largest, Transport for Greater Manchester, through to smaller unitaries and county councils. The private sector are represented in our governance by 11 local enterprise partnerships. The government built constructs that represent the private sector, but clearly we reach out further than just the local enterprise partnerships into other individual businesses and business groupings. And on our partnership board, we have 4 development partners: the Department for Transport, Network Rail, Highways England, and High Speed 2. So an all-encompassing public-private partnership to drive forward the strategic transport requirements of the North of England. But to ensure that our plan and our priorities don't stop at the boundaries of the North of England, we have MOUs in place with Transport Scotland and Welsh Assembly Government to make sure that we're reflecting the economic flows and the strategic transport flows beyond the boundaries of the North. And we have a working relationship with Midlands Connect and the Midlands Engine to ensure, again, connectivity into the East and the West Midlands is paramount. Later this year, we will become England's first sub-national transport body. This is something that was created in legislation about 16 months ago. And we will have a key job to actually produce the first sub-national transport plan for the North of England based on improving economic and transport connectivity. And through that public-private partnership, we will be the single voice on strategic transport issues for the North of England, working alongside and complementing the work that is done at a local level by the local transport authorities, and ensuring that our priorities are clear in the North to central government and those delivery partners based at a national level. We will be producing a multimodal transport plan for the North of England based on our requirements and our priorities in driving economic value in the North and making the most of investments that are already happening by both the public and the private sector, but stimulating further investment in the future. We will also be responsible for co-management of the Northern and Transpennine franchises, a role currently carried out jointly with the Department for Transport through our sister company, Rail North. Rail North will become part of Transport for the North so that we have one single voice on service issues and infrastructure issues for the rail industry. And finally, we will be delivering an ambitious programme that includes pan-Northern improvements to ticketing and information provision, a smart system to enable people to make the most of our improved transport connectivity across the North. But why are we doing this? We're doing this because the North is a big area, so it's 300 billion GVA, around 16 million population and over 7 million jobs. Huge natural and private sector enhanced assets, universities, ports, airports, all wrapped around by an excellent quality of life through our national parks. We have to make the most of those natural and economic assets across the North to ensure that the growth that we've seen recently in certain parts, particularly in the Northwest, continues and is expanded across the whole of the North of England. We currently have a big economic unit in the North, but it underperforms on every economic measure, both against England as a whole, but also the average taking out of London. A year ago, we produced an independent economic review. This identified the prime capabilities, the things that we do well in the North now, but if we package them together on behalf of the North, we can grow further and trade with new emerging global partners. This is supported by 3 enabling capabilities: in financial and professional services, education and logistics, which again, if we can package that and make the most of the North, we will get significant growth in jobs. We think the prize is significant. We believe between now and 2050, if we can get connectivity, skills, innovation, as well as educational standards, but connectivity in particular, we think we can drive almost 100 billion additional to the GVA of the North of England and create approximately 850,000 jobs. But one of the myths that I often hear is that this is all about one city or two cities in the North of England. Our economic analysis says that's not true. Those prime and enabling capabilities are spread right across the North. And no doubt we'll hear further this morning from colleagues in the Sheffield City region, from Cumbria, from Lancashire, about the economic assets they have in things like advanced manufacturing. Our job in the Transport for the North world is to connect the dots on this map to make the most of our natural and our economic assets across the North of England. Something that appeals to me, someone with a human geography degree, this is about using transport not as an end in itself, but a means to actually driving economic growth. It is as simple as our job is to put in place a long-term plan to join these dots so that they can make a greater use of their own assets in their own city regions, but do it on a northern and global stage. And to do that, we have to produce the first ever strategic transport plan for the North of England. It has to be multimodal, so it has to be looking at all modes, something that national agencies tend not to do. They look at road or they look at rail, they look at ports or they look at airports. Our job is to look at all of that and make sure that we're getting the most out of our transport system now, but planning for the future transport system to get the most out of it for both passengers, for freight and logistics as well. And that, by necessity, has to be a long-term plan. We have to make sure that we are consistent in our priorities in the North of England so that we can make the case to central government for the investment for that long-term plan. People that work in the transport or infrastructure industries know that these things take a long time to develop and deliver on the ground. And therefore, we have to be consistent in what we're doing and why we're doing it to make the case consistently on behalf of the North to central government. And it has to be evidence-led and based on economic rationale. It has to have a good business case. It has to be value for money, and it has to demonstrate how we will drive economic value and transform the economy of the North of England through a compelling case for that transport investment. And this is not about competing with elsewhere in the UK. This is about getting more money into infrastructure and strategic transport infrastructure in the North of England to drive and transform the economic base and the jobs base of the North of England. It has to be wide-ranging and ambitious in its scope. It is about delivering things in the short term, planning in the medium term, and making sure we have that ambition for a transformative transport infrastructure in the North of England. It's about getting more out of the services in the franchises that have already been let, but it's also about getting more out of our motorway system and our rail system. More services, better services from the existing infrastructure. But finally, there will be links that do require significant new infrastructure. We're convinced that this will require a new railway line between Liverpool and Manchester and Leeds, and the use of the high-speed 2 network between Manchester Airport and Manchester for Northern Powerhouse rail services, as well as the use of the high-speed 2 network between Sheffield and Leeds to deliver the outputs that we need to link Sheffield to Leeds to Manchester. But it is about doing that in a business-like way and making sure that we're clear on our priorities, not a wish list of schemes, but something that we can demonstrate with a compelling evidence base of why we need this to drive our economic base forward. And it needs to add value. It's not about duplicating what happens at a local transport authority level. It's about being clear on pan-northern priorities so that we're adding value not just at a northern level, but adding value to national government because we're clear on behalf of those 16 million people what our transport priorities are for the North of England. And equally, it has to have the support of the travelling public now, the travelling public of the future, but the business community now need to make clear your priorities for us to capture them into the strategic transport plan, and we need your voice to make it clear to central government where we need that investment across the North of England. Last week, we produced the evidence that we've gathered together to date. This, I think, is a new way of working in putting out to the public and to businesses the evidence and the analysis that underpins the work that we've done today, that you'll hear more from John and Jonathan Spruce this afternoon. That information is out there. We're currently going around the north of England, doing a wide range of roadshows and drop-in sessions to get your views about this evidence and analysis, but also your views about, does it feel right? So it's not just about endless analysis and evidence gathering, it's about, do you recognise the corridors that we believe require investment? Are they the pinch points that you recognise from your business or your community? Are they the right corridors and the right things for us to be identifying what the infrastructure schemes are that we believe will solve the problems? It already has put the private sector at the forefront in identifying where the international connectivity improvements are that are required through an independent commission that John chaired. But also asking the freight and logistics businesses, what's the business, what's the development and the growth that you expect to see? Why have you invested in the ports of the north of England? Where do you want us to make the transport case for greater connectivity for you to make your businesses grow? That evidence is out there now. In September this year, we'll be consulting more widely on where that is leading us to in the investment case for strategic transport in the north. We've had a really busy 18 months since John and I started at Transport for the North. We've grown significantly and now currently employ 80 people across our bases in Manchester and Leeds. We have put in our plans to be the first subnational transport body, and we expect to become that later in 2017, the first of a kind. We are producing the evidence and the rationale for the requirements that we need from the transport system, including the IER and all of the analysis that was published last week. We have to be clear over the summer how we want our new ambitious Northern Powerhouse rail system to connect with High Speed 2, how we want High Speed 2's network to be used to connect the north of England, not just to the south and to London, but between itself. So how can we use that infrastructure to transform the connectivity of Sheffield to Leeds? We also have submitted our business cases to central government for the first round of investment in our smart ticketing system across the north of England. The first 2 rounds have been through central government, and the final business case will be submitted by the end of the summer this year, which should enable us to start to see real improvements on rail in particular later in 2017 and 2018. And we will be consulting more widely on the draft transport plan from after our September board and throughout the autumn. That should lead to the priorities for the north of England's transport infrastructure being clear for you to consider if you believe it is right for us to make the case for greater levels of funding, not just for now, but for the development of schemes in the long term. And our outline business case for Northern Powerhouse Rail, the potential to have a new railway line from Liverpool connecting to the High Speed 2 network through to Manchester Airport, Manchester, Leeds and beyond. That should be submitted by the autumn of 2018. A national project which will drive the growth of the cities and of the north, but also of the UK. We've been very busy. Hopefully today's given you a flavour of where we've got to over the last 18 months, but also sets out our agenda for the next 6 to 12 months. And hopefully you'll be engaged today, but also engaged further as we develop our subnational transport plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Do we have any questions from the floor? We've got time for 1 or 2. Really want to see those hands. Maybe later, more caffeine. One at the front here, there's a brave soul. We do have a microphone.
Thank you. Good morning, Henry Brooks from TM Planning. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how the private sector can have more of a role in working with you and the public sector in the delivery, the funding of these things, the development opportunities that come from it, and in particular how the things that just smaller schemes can get on the radar, a bit like the Pinch Points programme with Highways England.
Okay. So I think there's 3 ways, Henry. I think the first one, this plan has to be based on a public-private partnership. And the work that we've done over the last 18 months has really brought together the voices of businesses, not just through the local enterprise partnerships, but business meetings like this and business associations. And we need to make sure that what we produce is not just a transport plan by transport planners for transport planners, but really reflects what businesses believe that the requirements are for that plan. And you know what they are, and hopefully when we're playing them back to you over the next few months, you'll recognise that we need greater investment on the motorway system. You will recognise that we need greater capacity on East-West Railway, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first way, is making sure that what we produce meets your needs. I think the second is that will then give us a clear set of priorities for the short, medium and long term. And actually, you need to make those priorities known to your business contacts, to your contacts in central government, so that we are collectively making the case for the North. It's no good persuading ourselves that we think we've got a good case for investment in the North. We have to persuade the Department for Transport, the Treasury, and other decision makers that this is the right thing, not just for the North, but for the UK as well. And I think finally, we are doing some work now about, is there a role for the private sector in funding and potentially delivering some of these schemes? So for instance, some of the bigger rail schemes, we will get to a point in a year's time of knowing precisely where those new lines need to go. That's the point at which we should determine, is that using the industry model now, or is that looking at alternative models? And I guess the final thing is making sure that our transport plan works from a land use and an economic planning perspective. And that's why I was putting the dots upon earlier. It's about linking those places, so making the most of the private sector investment that's already happened at airports and ports or wherever it might be, but also stimulating the growth that you and others might want to see through your own strategic economic plans at a local level.
In the centre there.
Jim Hancock, David, if I could, you won't be too surprised at this, put this in the sort of political context of where we are now. The anxiety is that with Brexit, with events that we've seen so tragically in London and everything else, that the huge challenge for everything you've put forward, and congratulations on what you've done. I know you're off to the private sector, the Northern Powerhouse ministers resigned. The fear amongst a lot of people is that forward momentum is going to be prejudiced. I mean, we've had plans and plans and plans. What is your assessment of the government's receptivity when your successor presumably finally puts in these plans for the Northern Powerhouse Rail?
One thing I disagree with you on, Jim, is that we've never had a Northern Strategic Transport Plan. And that's why we don't influence Network Rail and Highways England's plans, because we don't have that pan-Northern thing. We have local plans. But this is the first opportunity for us to put in place an economically based Northern Transport Plan. So I think that's a big prize. And where this has worked successfully, the public and private sector have then got behind those key priorities and made the case, irrespective of who's in charge locally, politically, what the government of the day is. So if you look at London and Greater Manchester to a certain extent, their plans have been through huge political change. And it's our job, I guess, to make sure the plan is robust. But then it's our job collectively to make sure that we're sticking with those priorities. And this is about economic growth. This is about stimulating additional GVA and creating jobs. That logic was really, really relevant a year and a half ago. I would say that logic is even more relevant now about the need for greater economic growth, not just in the North, but driving UK's economic growth and jobs creation as well. So I think it was valid then, I think it's valid now. And there are priorities. We should be making the case on behalf of the North, not expecting a small number of individuals in Westminster to do it.